haven't used prep much at all in my, sorry? Oh.
Sorry, that's my bad. Don't worry, continue.
Okay. So I haven't used Tableau prep much at all in my role, so I found it was a great way of learning a tool. A similar puzzle type related challenge, so I sort of embraced that and started doing those challenges sort of every week as well. I probably managed to commit myself for the first couple of years. I was probably doing them every week. More recently, I've tailed off a little bit and dip in and out when I can. Also back around in 2019, I started writing my blog. So I bumped into a fellow colleague of Jenny's, Lorna Brown, at a Oxford user group. And through our conversation, she persuaded me that I should start blogging my Workout Wednesday solutions. It's something I've been doing internally at the company I was at, but hadn't sort of been brave enough to sort of do publicly. So I took a deep breath, found a blog site I sort of quite like the look of, and started blogging those. So I do write solution guides to every challenge that gets published, give or take a couple. I do all the challenges, but maybe if I'm on holiday, I don't necessarily get around to redoing the solution guides. And I tend to publish them up on Twitter a couple of days after I've published my solution to the challenge. And it's through this sort of commitment and dedication to that blog and the learning that I think I sort of pass on to others through doing it that gave me the nomination and ultimately the selection for the visionary role this year, which I'm incredibly humbled about. It's a great, got to know a great set of people through that. And I'm really proud of what I've done to be able to get to that role. So fast forward to now, and that might be surprising some of you, but this is my first target presentation. So please be gentle with me. Please be kind. Don't ask me anything too awkward at the end of this. Yeah, Jenny and Lorna actually again tag team me at the Tableau conference in the US. Like, come on, will you do a prep talk for us at the Tableau prep user group? So I was like, okay, what am I going to talk about? So I still don't really use prep to a real degree in my job role. So what I decided to do was I'd stick with something that I'm familiar with, and that is prepping data. So I do those challenges when I can. And so I thought what I'd do this time was I would recreate a prepping data challenge from this year for you guys. And the one I chose to do was one from June this year, which was a Workout Wednesday prepping data combo. So the last 2-3 years, the teams have combined with the intention of, here's some data that you need to prepare in Tableau Prep. When you've prepared that data, to recreate a visualization in Tableau Desktop for it. And this is ultimately what the ultimate end game was to build a visualization relating to Salesforce opportunities, where we have one row of data per opportunity, and an indicator as the different stages of that opportunity went through. So a sort of dot plot here, giving some idea of sort of what stage this opportunity has gone through. So I've got to move my control bar up here. So that's what I'm going to work on and show you today and demonstrate. So this is the challenge that we're looking to do. And what we were given, so the data we were provided for this one was just sort of in some Excel sort of sample data of Salesforce data. But this can be, you can use Prep now to connect direct to Salesforce. So if you have that capability and have access to a Salesforce account to do that, then you can do this by connecting. But I'm going to just use the data, the tables, and the sample data that was provided by the team. And in there we had two data tables. An opportunity table, which essentially contained one row for each opportunity, with some sort of summary data about that opportunity, including the date it was created, and the date that it was closed or expected to close. We then also had an opportunity history table, which gives you the steps, so multiple rows per opportunity, and it gives you the stages and the dates and information about when that opportunity passed through those stages. And what the purpose of the challenge was to try and combine these tables so that we supplemented essentially the history table with information about a record for when the date was opened and a record, if maybe, for when it was closed. So let's crack open prep and see what we need to do. So in true, now I'm going to say blue Peter style. I know that might not mean much to all of you, but here's one I sort of started to prepare earlier. So I've connected to the opportunity table, and I have done a slight preparation sort of on this. And I've already, this opportunity table's got an awful lot of fields in it, and I didn't want them all. I know I don't need them all. So rather than get rid of them later in the process, I've got rid of the fields I don't want for now. So I've just pulled through the key fields that I want, which is the stage name, and we've got the date that says it's closed, the ID, and the created date. So if we look into a view of that, we've just got 4 fields that we're working with. The first thing we want to be able to do is we've got ultimately here one row that's got the ID and the date it was created and date it was closed all on the same row. And we need to change this into having a multiple row for each of the, whether it was opened or closed. So we're going to start by creating a pivot. And we want to take columns, the created date and the closed date, and we want to convert those into rows. So we're going to use the columns to rows, pivot option, and we bring through the closed date and the created date. So this is transferred that data around. So we now have, for each ID, we're now going to have, let's maximize this window a bit. We're now going to have 2 rows of data for each ID. And we're going to rename this field stage, and we're going to rename this field date. Okay. And then I'm going to then add another view step into here. And I'll just rename while we're going to keep this data clean. I'll rename this step. So the next thing, let's have a look at the, so we're going to look at the requirements, and we need to pivot the data, rename the data, okay, update the stage field so the opportunity is closed, the expected close date. Well, that is, okay, no, we've got another step we need to do for that. Pivot the created date, opportunity opened, and a row for the expected close date. So what we've been asked to do here is we need to rename the field's values. So let's go back into that. So our stage is currently called closed date and created date. We want to give a rename to these. Now we could literally rename each of these values by double clicking into the field, and I'm going to change the created to be called opened, and I'm going to change the close date to be expected close date. You can see what it's ultimately done is it's effectively applied a grouping, which we could have done using the grouping functionalities within the controls, but given we're just using one field and a rename of it, just double clicking is the quickest way to do that. Right, now we need to basically supplement that if the stage name that we have over here is actually closed, lost or closed one, then we want to replace the expected close date, the stage called expected close date, with that actual stage name. Otherwise, if we're in any of these other stages, then we're going to leave the stage as expected close date. So we're going to create a new calculated field. Oh, well, not a new calculated field. We're going to create a calculated field for this. And what Tableau Prep is good at doing that Tableau desktop itself doesn't let you do is you can do like circular references. So I can create a field called stage, which is already the stage, and reference the field itself within it. So rather than having to create another field, move all the data into that field, then delete and rename fields around, I can just work with exactly the same field, and I've already created the calculation I need. And so we're saying if the stage name contains the word closed, and the stage is the expected close date, then use the data from the stage name field. Otherwise, just retain the data that's already in stage. So if we look down at the bottom here, at the data we've got down here, what I'm expecting on this second row here is that the stage expected close date, the stage name is close loss. So I will expect the word close loss to now appear into this stage field here, whereas for the row above, it will remain with the word opened. So let's just apply that change and see if that's what happens. Yep, we've got closed, lost, and closed, lost, opened, and closed, lost. So that's good in terms. Let's save that row, save that data. Right, let's look at what the next step is. Sorry, I'll just move around. Okay, right, so update the stage name field. Remove unnecessary fields. Now, actually, I've already done that. I did that right at the start because it's going to take a little while to get those removed. Bring in additional information from the opportunity history table. So this is where now we want to look at what we want to do is union the data together. So we've got 2 rows for every opportunity in this table up here, in our opportunity table, and down our opportunity history table, we have for each opportunity ID multiple rows of data that indicates the stages at which it's gone through. And we want to combine this data. We ultimately want to supplement the data we have in this field with the extra couple of rows that we've got for each opportunity from this table. So we're going to use a union to do that. So let's just create that to start with. We can create the union, and I'm just going to drag this table and add. Let's have a look at what the output is. So when we do a union, we end up having an indication, extra column gets added to indicate what source, what table the row of data might have come from. What we can also see going on is, oh, we've got 2 columns, one for ID and one for opportunity ID. In our mind, they are the same thing, but we've got 2 columns for them. So actually, the union has ended up creating 2 columns because they're named differently. So we actually want these 2 columns to be merged. Let's just take a step back, and I'm going to look at the opportunity table here, and it's called ID. So I'm going to rename this field exactly the same, with exactly the same case as what this field is called in the opportunity history table. I prefer to call it opportunity ID rather than just the ID because it gives me relevance of what context, what ID is actually related to. So I've done that, and if I go then back forward, I can now see that I've only got a single opportunity ID column. That's great. But I've also got a similar thing going on with my date fields. I've got the creation date and the date. So this time I'm going to rename the history table and rename this field just to be date. And that should then mean that I have, yeah, so that's now merged all those two rows together. So now what I'm doing, now what I've got is I've got my union supplemented rows of data. So that's good. Right, what's next? So we combine the 2 as required. So next step, ensure each row has a sort order associated with it. Okay, so the data that came from our history table has a sort order field which indicates the order of the stage that goes through, that's the cycle of which those stages, because I think an opportunity can go through the same stage multiple times, so the order gives you a bit of a sequential idea as to what goes where. So when we look at our merge data, we'll find we've got some null sort orders here, and all those records are the ones that have come from our original opportunity table itself. So we need to give those records, some of those records, a sort order. And so we're going to, like we did before, we're going to create a calculated field, but we're going to call it sort order, because ultimately what we're doing is we're updating that sort order field. And the logic we need to put is basically saying if the stage is opened, then we're going to set the sort order to 0. If it's expected close date, then we're going to set it to 11. So we're just going to top and tail with the sort orders that are outside the range of the data we've already got. Brilliant. Okay, that's done. So all our opens now have a sort order of 0. All our expected close date have a sort order of 11. So that's good. Next step. We need to remove some unnecessary fields, and then we also need to remove some duplicate rows that may have occurred when the two bits of data were put together. So let's have a look at that. So unnecessary fields, we don't need this table names column, so we can just remove that. What we also need to look at doing actually is we have a stage field, which is the one that was derived originally from our opportunity table. And then we've got the stage name, which is derived from our opportunity history table. We need to combine these two fields as well, because we've got information in this stage field that talks about, gives us an indication of when the row was opened or when it was expected close date. And we've also got the information in this stage name of all the different stages that this opportunity is going through. And we've got a null record in this stage. If we click on the null, we can see it relates to all the values we've got going on in the stage table. So we want to update all these null values with basically the value that comes out of the stage name. So we've got a single list of all the potential different stages that we now want to report on. So again, we're going to create a calculator field, call it stage, because we're again updating that stage field. And we're going to apply the logic that if the stage is null, then replace it with the value in the stage name field, otherwise leave it as is. So let's apply that and save that. So brilliant. So we've now got a complete list of all the stages in one column, got all the sort orders. Oh, we've got some null sort orders here though. So what are they to do with? Let's have a little click and we have a bit of look and have a look and examine the data. And they all seem to be related to values being closed, lost and closed won. So let's just have a bit more of a closer examination of some of these records. So if we pick up one of these IDs, what can we see? So we can see for this opportunity that we've got two stages that are closed won and one stage that's opened. We've got the sort order of null, sort order of 9, and we've also got the sort order of null. And if we look at these two closed ones here, we can see they occurred in the same date. So let's have a look at another and see if we get a similar sort of pattern. Let's have a look at the null. Are we getting a similar sort of pattern? Yeah, we've got some closed lost here. Two records of closed lost. One's got sort of, one's null. Both happen on the same day. So here we are. We can start to see that these are our duplicates, and the duplicates that are coming along because these are the ones that had reached the closed stage from the opportunity table, but had also got into the history table as well. We don't need one of these rows basically. So we want to get rid of those duplications. So that's because from the pattern we can see they're all the ones where the sort order is null. So we can just simply exclude those. So I'm going to right click on the null and I'm going to exclude. And now I don't also now need this stage name field because all the information I have is in my stage field. So there we have, we've got our final set of data that we need. So it's been cleaned, ready to put into Tableau. So I'm just like, it doesn't matter really, but I'm just too pedantic and like to reorder stuff. And I'm going to now create my output step. And I'm going to save this as a CSV and stick it somewhere. And then if I run the flow, I've got my data and already then start building in Tableau desktop. So that's what I plan to present to you guys. I have then be able to build, using that data, you'll then be able to build this. If it's something that you're interested in, have a go, then you can look at my solution guide if need be to get some tips on what to do. So where is my splash page? So I hope you found that useful. I might find some things in there that you might not have known about. I published my sort of Tableau journey, but I obviously didn't go through it all completely. I didn't want to bore you. You can have an explore of that yourself as to sort of what I've been up to over the last 10 years with Tableau. The Prep and Data Challenge that I was following and that I've just gone through is available too. along with the Workout Wednesday visualization, and then my blog as well, which I blogged about, and I have that. Oh, I thought I had that available. Oh, yes, I do. Here we go. Here's my blog. So in this blog that I did for this particular challenge, I did blog the whole prepping data solution as well as then the Workout Wednesday solution. I don't tend to always do the prepping data ones because the team do a stellar job themselves of writing all the how-tos and how to build the stuff together on there every week after sort of just before the next challenge is released. But if you're interested in having a go, maybe having a go at flexing your desktop skills as well, if that's something you're familiar with, then feel free to sort of have a look through the blog and have a go and see what you come up with. And that is the end of me. I should stop sharing.
Brilliant. Thanks so much for that, Donna. Honestly, can't believe that you're saying that that's your first time presenting at a TUG, because that was absolutely pro. Like, well done. Got a lot of comments in the chat saying great session. Thank you so much for that. If there are any questions for Donna, then please leave them in the Q&A. I just want to say as well that I love seeing like walkthroughs of how people use prep, because we all do slightly different things. And I love your method with like the union of sort of looking after the union, like kind of ignoring the union step altogether almost, and then just looking, where are those nulls, like which fields do I need to then go back and rename? Like that's a really clear way of sort of visualizing what do I need to do to change that. I do have a question for you now in the Q&A from Nick, and he said that you don't use prep that much in your daily role. Is it down to your clients not using prep, or is it your own focus that you get more put with clients that are just doing the dashboarding side of things? In your experience, what is going on there?
Yeah, it's more, so I've touched it more probably in this role than what I've had at previous jobs, because I am now in a consultancy role, so there is more variance in the types of sort of products and tools that we use. The clients I've worked on personally haven't used prep, so I haven't had to need to use it, but other colleagues have, and we've got a sort of, probably like yourselves, our own little hive mind, our own little Slack channels and stuff like that, and periodically people have sort of, I'm having a problem with prep, and I've stepped in and said, well, can I help, type of thing, and try to solve it that way. So I've had a bit more exposure, but yeah, just not real world scenarios. I think, oh, that'd be a great idea of like how to solve that problem, to be able to sort of present that back. But if I come across any, I shall let you know. I'll store them up.
You're always welcome to come back, Donna. We've got you once now, so.
Yeah.
Brilliant, cool. So thank you again, Donna. And I think that if you have any more questions for Donna, make sure to just drop them in. We can always ask them to her. But for now, let's hand over to Tim for his session. So over to you, Tim.
Hello, thank you. Just share my screen. Hopefully you can see my screen. So just
yep, all good.
Okay, yeah, perfect, excellent. Good stuff. Thank you. Thanks for that, Donna. It was really, really interesting. I always like seeing other people use prep, because I think I learn what is sort of normal habits that everyone has, and sort of what's unique to you, and also ways you can improve the way you use Tableau Prep itself. I use Tableau Prep not a lot, actually. It's very similar situation to Donna, because I'm a consultant. I come across a lot of use cases where prep isn't just available necessarily at the client, or if it is available, it's not necessarily something that's recommended to be used. And so what I try to do sometimes is I try and encourage the client, look, you already have a license for a creator license for desktop. You could solve some of the basic challenges you're having with Tableau Prep. And so I always try and educate users on that. And one of the interesting challenges is, bringing more people on that journey over the last year or so has actually been a really interesting journey. And I thought this would be a great opportunity to just take a step back and actually look at Tableau Prep. It's actually an alarmingly young product. If you've just joined the Tableau community in general, you might think it's quite an established product, but as hopefully you'll see throughout my talk, it's a very young product, and we'll go into that a bit more. But if I proceed to the next slide. Yeah, you can find me online. I make videos about Tableau and other products very soon. I'm a consultant at the Information Lab. I also am a product manager. I look after one of our learning products that we're internally using at the moment and working with a few clients to evolve. But in the due course, we might end up making it more public. But I sort of practice what I preach on YouTube. I teach people Tableau. I teach people lots of ways of using Tableau, but I'm also trying to make content that helps people who are just getting started with Tableau. That's actually my main focus. I get a lot of feedback to do more advanced videos, but I think the advanced stuff is covered really well in blogs, challenges, makeover Mondays, prepping Wednesdays. All of these things are really, really good. So I focus on new users to try and help them, bring them into the Tableau community, and that's where I focus. So if you want to reach out and say hello, please do. I'm always happy to hear feedback and hear from lots of people from the community. What is the prep State of the Union? So this is a concept borrowed from the American political sphere. Essentially, every year they do a speech, which is essentially just a talk that describes the state of the American. Let's call it the American. What word would I use? Maybe let's just say America as a country. Let's just use that as a phrase. And so for Tableau Prep, I thought this is a great opportunity to take a step back, look and see whether Tableau Prep has actually fulfilled its early vision. When it was announced, there was a very specific vision that Tableau had, and it's interesting to look back and see, well, have we achieved that vision? Have we actually reached where we thought we'd reach with that product? And as users, do we feel that vision is being sort of fulfilled? Assess the new features over time. What are the new features that we've asked for that have arrived? What's still left to bring into the product? And then look at the challenges we still face, because of course it's a young product. There's still going to be edges that we hit up against, or rough edges that are jarring when we come across them. So I thought this would be a great opportunity to just do a bit of that. Okay, so Jenny also asked me to briefly touch on what's in 22.3. And the interesting thing with 22.3, actually, it's the first time where I think the Tableau releases have not been widely available in a beta process. So because 22.3 it's probably just around the corner. My hunch is this week or next week. I don't know the answer officially, but my hunch is this week or next week. We have not had time to get hands-on with these features, and so it's not sort of right to sort of come on and do a demo of something that hasn't been documented, hasn't been done well. But as and when these features come out, obviously Tableau themselves do a good job of communicating the features through documentation, and members in the community, I'm sure the Prep Slack group will be diving into some of these capabilities. But it was useful just to touch on these very briefly. The ability to put data into CRM Analytics. CRM Analytics is what used to be called Einstein Analytics in Salesforce. When it came over to the Tableau family, it was then called Tableau CRM, and then more recently it's been rebranded again to be called CRM Analytics. So here you've got the ability for Tableau Prep to put data into that Salesforce platform, which is quite a powerful capability. We've got a new web data connector. This is actually new across the whole platform. So desktop and server all have this new web data connector that's coming in. Essentially, it works very similar to the connectors that you get on the Tableau Exchange. It uses something called a taco file. It's an extension that you'll be familiar with the more you use Tableau with these new connectors. And so that brings the web data connector under that unified framework, which I think will also make it easier to deploy these web data connectors on the Exchange and have them be deployed in enterprise situations. But again, that's just early days, so I'm not sure about that. And then Sharepoint lists connector. So previously they had the OneDrive connector be sort of rebuilt to work with certain capabilities. And part of that was also making that work better with SharePoint. So they brought SharePoint and OneDrive under one roof. One omission to that was SharePoint lists. So now that connector is available in 22.3, I think that could be a really, really good use case for Tableau Prep to start to bring in bits of information from this ecosystem. So interested to see what people do with that. I don't use SharePoint much myself, so I'm very much a new person to that. So if you've got any feedback actually on how Prep and SharePoint lists would benefit you, drop it in the comments and we can chat more about it. So let's get to the first question that we were asking. Has the product fulfilled its early vision? Prep didn't even start out as Prep actually. It started out as something called Project Maestro, and it was at Data 16, which was I believe in Austin, Texas. So that was probably my third Tableau conference in 2016, and that was also the same conference, coincidentally, that we were introduced to Hyper, which was a new extension. That's what extracts are now based from. So it was actually a very busy conference. There was so much announced at that conference. We also had Tableau start to talk about data management as a concept. The product didn't actually come until a couple of years later, but the sort of overriding mission when it was announced on stage by Dan Jewett was, we're creating a new product to help you prepare and integrate data in advance of your analysis activities. And the context was actually quite a very simple message, and it wasn't that Tableau Prep, well, then Maestro, was going to come in and become an ETL tool. Tableau never positioned it as an ETL tool. They simply positioned it as an alternative to the kind of users who were doing things like power pivots, basic data prep in Excel. This was supposed to be that sort of additional tool to help those activities become much faster and smoother and help people solve everyday problems. So whilst at launch, people might have confused this as a tool like Alteryx. It was very, very different, actually. It was actually aiming at the large user base that do very basic tasks in Tableau every single day, or in Excel every single day, to clean and prepare data. So it was called Maestro. The beta went out, lots of people had it, and there was actually tons of excitement in the community. I sourced this image from the Tableau blog. I actually had to go back to the blog to kind of find this, because what this blog post was, and I'll maybe put a link in the comments at the end of the talk, it was a blog by the UX team behind Tableau Prep, and they talked about three concepts, essentially: flow, the profile, and the data grid. And when Tableau launched in beta, it actually looked like this. And this doesn't look that different to what it looks like today. Okay, there's a couple of sort of refinements that have been made to the products, the way the tools work, the way the flow comes together. But they talked about the product in these three simple steps. And each of these steps essentially, answered a challenge. So the flow was essentially an overview of the data journey, showing you where your data starts and where it ends and how you get there. The profile was a summary of that. So you could essentially see a summarized view of your whole data set as it was going through the flow. You click on different points and you're able to sort of get a picture of that. And then the data grid was the granular view. We all love to look at data in detail when we're trying to troubleshoot, find problems. That's where the data grid really comes in, when you're trying to narrow down what's going on with a couple of these records. You saw as Donna was working through her flow, she used the profile and the data grid to help diagnose sort of what was going on in some instances. So this high-level concept actually has stayed very consistent even up until today. And if you go to the blog, they actually talk about how they modeled the flow based on the Tube network here in London. Well, I'm not in London, I'm in Colchester, but it was modeled off the Tube network here in the UK. And this is actually really interesting, because if you think about it, when we're working with data, it is very much a journey. You don't always know where you're going to end up, especially as you iterate through a flow and you kind of work through different instances of the flow. But in essence, you do have a rough idea of the route you might want to take and the different stops you might want to do to sort of get to the end result. And so I think this is a beautiful analogy for how Tableau Prep has always worked and has actually stayed very, very true to its vision all the way through. And then when we go to the summary and the data grid, I think this has probably become one of the most powerful aspects of Tableau Prep, because you have this sort of, I'll call it superpower, to be able to dig into your data and the different sort of aspects of your data without ever feeling like you're like in Tableau Desktop, when you open up the view data fields, is to just look at all the rows and you have to click around. This sort of interface makes it actually very easy and very elegant. I've not come across a tool anywhere that allows you to peruse your data as big as it may be or as small as it may be in as easy a way. And I've found this sort of flexibility really, really unique to Tableau Prep in my experience. And so I think, Tableau really actually kept to this vision all the way through. And you can actually do that and see that it's been consistent. Here I've got a screenshot of a video that Joshua Milligan did now in February 2018. This is just after it was announced at conference. And what is interesting, if you go and watch the video on YouTube, you'll actually see that the product hasn't changed philosophy that much. It's actually been consistent. If we look at something like desktop and the authoring experience, that has actually changed a lot in the same amount of time, even if it's as subtle as moving to the browser or the way things are done. That sort of just keeps evolving. And so in my opinion, I generally do think they've actually delivered on that initial vision that they had. And I think they've done a good job of not busying the interface, because that's the other problem with data prep tools, is that they kind of throw everything, including the kitchen sink, at you. They give you all the tools everywhere all at once, and it's, you kind of feel empowered, you feel like you got a Swiss Army knife, but that also can get in the way, and it can be intimidating for people who just have a very simple task, and it can add something I call cognitive load to the whole process of cleaning your data. That idea that you're being presented with so many options that it actually makes it hard to know which one to use and when to use it. And so Tableau Prep, I love its progressive disclosure. When you click on, let's say, the join tool, it shows you an interface specifically for the join tool. When you click on the summary tool, it shows you an interface specifically for that. And it's not just sort of one thing that you have to sort of cajole to make work. So I've really enjoyed sort of the product vision, and talking to Tableau Prep users and Tableau Prep developers, i.e., people at Tableau who build the product. I think this has always been sort of a continuing part of the philosophy that's stuck with the product. And so let's move on to the features, and this is probably where it gets interesting. In my view, I think it's actually been quite healthy. So I've put together this timeline, and it just goes through some of that sort of history that I talked about. The first thing is, of course, Data 16 when it was announced. You've got the public beta, which then came almost a year later, but it was actually in beta that whole time. Then you've got the introduction of Tableau Prep as an actual product. So what happened in 2018 is that Tableau Prep stopped being part of the beta, and until that point it was just free to use, and then it was rolled into what was called the Creator SKU. So the Creator SKU was Tableau Creator, so Tableau Desktop, Tableau Creator, and access to Tableau Server or Tableau Online, then now Tableau Cloud. And when I look back at sort of the timeline of events, I didn't actually realize this, but data management itself was actually a pretty consistent theme throughout this whole period. And data management, the product, was released in 2019. And I'll come back to why that's important a little later on when I talk about prep and data management together. And then in August 2019, we've got R and Python scripts. I call this out because there was a lot of capabilities that people were already asking Tableau Prep to do. And I think an elegant way to solve some of those really advanced niche use cases was actually just to let people use what they're already using in R and Python and bring that into Tableau Prep. Now, ideally, we'd love to see some of those features simplified so they're more accessible to everyday users. But for now, for the people who are already using those kind of technologies, this was a great addition because it gave them that flexibility. In 2019, we then got the Tableau catalog. A catalog is just essentially Tableau's ways of collecting metadata about all the different assets on the Tableau server or Tableau cloud, and presenting that in a way that allows you then to expose things like data lineage, see where there could be issues in your flows. And then later on, we got Prep in the browser. So having used Prep Builder almost entirely as a desktop product, we got Prep in the browser, along with the ability to start to write to databases, which was a really, really powerful thing. Until December 2020, you couldn't write to a database in Tableau Prep, which is actually kind of interesting. That's not that long ago. It's almost just under 2 years ago. And now that capability is in there, most people who use this couldn't imagine a world without it. And then more recently, we've had improvements to scheduling and performance. So we've had linked tasks, which allows you to orchestrate the order in which flows are running so that you can sequence how things are done. Of course, it requires the data management add-on and Prep Conductor to do the scheduling in the first place. But if you have that, it gives you a little bit more control as to how prep is either running through flows, or some people are actually using it to stagger the way prep approaches databases. So rather than having multiple prep flows hitting the database at the same time, you orchestrate all your prep flows to hit the database one after the other by putting them all in one linked task. And then that just takes off the load on your database as well. So lots of creative use cases there. And that's brought us pretty much to today. There's tons of features I haven't put in here because to me, they're just not as headline features. I know prep parameters are pretty powerful, but they're just in my mind, they're like a quality of life improvement that makes it easy to do new things. But maybe that's a contentious argument. We can chat about that later. And so if I go back to that point I was making about the Tableau catalog, if we step back and we just think about what's actually going on here, if you're using prep in a business sort of setting, you have the potential for this tool to be generating lots of metadata in the background, creating lots of information that's actually quite useful, that's not necessarily the data in the flow itself. And the Tableau catalog actually becomes quite an important part of that, because for the first time, you can get data from multiple sources beyond a workbook and bring them together. And so if you're doing this in a business setting, you do actually need some capability to understand where is the data coming from, what's being used where, and how is it being used. And that's where the Tableau catalog actually comes in and is super important. I'd almost think that you couldn't use the scheduling capabilities in Tableau Prep without Tableau catalog, because if you just look to the right here, when you then come to sort of interrogate, well, what is my flow feeding upstream? You've got data sources, workbooks, sheets, dashboards, and owners, people who are building those assets. And in reverse, what is my flow feeding from? If you look downstream, which is what Tableau calls it, you've got tables and databases. And databases could be very vast. It could be a virtual connection. It could be lots of different things. Bear with me 1 second. And so I think it's fitting that these products are sort of twinned in the data management capability. But I also think that maybe when building prep, I actually think these features all sort of were born together. You know, you start using prep, a bunch of question comes out of it, Tableau catalog comes out of that, data management comes out of that, and it becomes one sort of big skew. And maybe that's why it sits together. We can talk more about whether that's right to have it as a separate thing or not later on as well. And so if we want to sort of have a deep dive into the features that have been released, what I'll do is I'll hopefully you've all seen this in some way or form. If not, it's an absolutely sensational resource. It's called the Tableau Release Navigator. It was actually released as a feature in 2020. I believe it was last year. I can't remember the exact number, but what I'll do is I'll go to it here in my browser and we can just have a look at it. And it lives in Tableau Public. There's actually a different version for different languages. So if I just go back here to the core product marketing profile on Tableau Public, you'll see that there's actually different versions for different languages now. This was a fairly recent addition. So if you want different variants, you can actually go and find it. I'll go to the English one. And what you can do here is actually you can just pick a product. Let's say I'll pick Tableau Prep. And what we'll do is we'll go to tick all the features so we can see everything as a list. And this is essentially the capability set that's been added over time. It starts with 2019.1. There are features before this, obviously, but this release navigator doesn't go back further than that. And you could scrape some websites, but I'm sure Tableau wouldn't be a fan of that. So if you scroll down this list, you can see that we have been consistently getting features over time. And actually, when I dig into this a little bit more, I kind of classify these features into different groups. We'll come onto that in a short while. There's an activity for you in a few seconds first. But it's actually really interesting to see the continued pace of development and how quickly the features are coming through into the product. A lot of them, in my view, are quality of life improvements. But I think it's a really fascinating sort of journey to see that in many ways, features have been added. And so what I wanted to do is just get a sense from you very briefly what you'd like to see more of in terms of features. So if you, excuse me, if you head to this website and type this number or use the QR code, what I should be able to do is gauge from everyone watching, and it really does require participation, so please get involved if you can, just to get an idea of what you'd like to see more of. And over here, as you start to fill these in, hopefully someone's filling these in already, I'll start to see dots appear on the screen. So please get involved. What I should probably do is leave it up, and then I'll put this on another screen, and then that way you're more easily able to see what's going on. So please try and fill some of these in if you can. I'll give it a minute or two. One of the things I always think about is, we're as a user base, we're always asking for different use cases, and I think we all sort of sit in different camps and we all do different things. I'm a consultant, so the things I ask for tend to be around capabilities that allow me to be a consultant. So they're not necessarily the kind of things that basic users sort of want every single day to use Tableau, because in my mind I've found solutions to those things. In other cases, if you're running a team or you're running an analytics setup, a BI team, you have different requirements. You maybe want better capability to be able to extract information, to see what's going on in the background. And so I think what's playing out nicely is that, we're actually getting a really even spread. I'll show you the visualization in a second of where people are ending up. I'll just give it like 10 more seconds. If you haven't done it, please hop in and do it. And I'll get this up on screen very shortly. Okay, I'll do it now. So hopefully you can still do the survey later on. So this is how the results are coming out. So everyone is almost spread out beautifully across everything. There's sort of the only really big thing is stability and bugs, and I'll come to that towards the end of the talk. But stability and bugs is a big group. Parsing and extraction tools. There is obviously stuff in these groupings that I missed, so I apologize for that, but I deliberately chose these because they speak to the next slide in my talk. So more analytics capabilities, parsing and extraction tools, stability and bugs, better cleansing tools, connecting new data sources, and quality of life. These are sort of the headline things, and we're quite evenly spread. So you can see how it's a huge challenge for Tableau to sort of meet all these needs. This doesn't really give a product manager any clear place to start with, because it's actually quite even, and they probably have to speak to each of these features anyway, because some of these things come together. For example, parsing and extraction tools probably come hand in hand with better cleansing tools, because once you've parsed your data, you then often need to do a little bit of cleansing, and so some of these things pair up. So if we go back to the slide, I actually scraped this, not the website, the workbook, and I grouped these things myself. And I sort of, basically my logic for this was anything that improved the experience of using Tableau Prep, I classified as a quality of life improvement. An example is, being able to add descriptions to flows, or naming them, or being able to put the flow or position things how you want. That wasn't a feature, then it did become a feature. That was a quality of life improvement. Any ability to connect or write to a data source, I term that as a connecting capability. So whether you're connecting to the database to write to it or connecting to read from it, this is what I put them in. And then you have cleansing, analytics, and data science. So, all those parsing, automation, and improvement. So automation was solved very easily with the scheduling capability, and there's not really much you can do to that beyond being able to link tasks and so on. That's a fairly well understood thing in the analytics world. The feature set for that is actually quite simple, but just needs to be reliable. And then if you spread that out on the right hand side, what I've done is I've put a bar chart that shows you in which version, the minimum version of Tableau, that feature supports. So a lot of features were actually, although they were introduced throughout 2019, they were back sort of filled to be able to run in 2019.1. And then over time, it's actually stayed pretty consistent. We've had a good sort of healthy amount of features, and the coloring again is the same with these particular trends that I've picked up. And so if you dig into that a little bit more, and you then go and start to look at, well, what's the bandwidth of these features over time? Are we getting more features? Are we getting less features? Is it starting to thin out a little bit more? Is there something to really sort of pull out here? And in my view, it's a very tenuous thing to sort of extract from this. I can't really take anything out from this because, again, Tableau Prep is so young. So in all honesty, we've only got 4 years worth of data to go by. And if you've worked in product management, 4 years is nothing. And some features live in the product management cycle for 4 years. So what you really want is 8 years worth of data like we've had with desktop. But if I do look at the more recent years, 2022, which we are currently now, we know what's coming in 22.3. We know what sort of came last year. it is sort of interesting to see there's almost like a thinning out of certain capabilities, and we're getting more things sort of sitting behind the data management. So you could argue that in terms of features, Tableau Prep has maybe reached a level of maturity for its initial vision, that initial vision of being a basic tool that people could use instead of Excel. But now we're starting to get into this sort of frame where we need some of the more powerful sort of features to come through, and that's exactly what sort of the next part of this talk is about. So this is what I'm sort of really passionate about. Actually, it's time to deliver beyond the original vision. How can we take Tableau Prep to the next level, as it were? And so I went to the ideas page. If you're not familiar with the ideas page, if you search Tableau ideas, it takes you to the community.tableau.com or whatever. And in there, you can go to the ideas section where you could suggest ideas for Tableau to work on specific features. Now, if you filter that to just Tableau Prep, there are 490 something ideas. I can't remember the exact number. A small bunch of that are duplicates, so they've been archived. So what I've just got here is the three really useful groupings: the open ideas, the things that haven't been done yet or are being looked at; the released ideas, there's 76, and then there's under construction, which is 3 at the moment. So it makes sense there's only 3 under constructions. It would be crazy to have like 50 under construction, because that's sort of spreading yourself thinly. But there's still a wealth of ideas here, 406 ideas, some of them, 4 years old, right from the beginning when Tableau Prep was announced. And I've ordered these by the topmost ask ones. It's probably hard to see them on screen, but go to the ideas page yourself, have a look. There's some absolute stormers in terms of ideas that were, put forward 4 years ago. And I think we have gotten to the stage where it's really, really important that Tableau start to sort of pick some of these up and start to, implement them, because one of the biggest hurdles is sort of adoption. And when you want people to adopt a product, you kind of need your early adopters to be able to march ahead and showcase to the rest of the community how to use the product. And at the moment, I think if I speak maybe loosely on behalf of the group, we are kind of hitting the edges of what the product can do compared to other tools that maybe exist on the market. And so this is the final bit of engagement for everyone. I'll leave this on screen again, and if you head to this, survey again. This is a different one, not the same as the last one. And what we will do is, if I could get your feedback on errors, and this speaks to the next point I want to sort of make about Tableau Prep. And and when I talk about sort of hitting the edges, I'm really talking about things that are stopping you from encouraging other people to use Tableau Prep, things that are maybe difficult, or you go to open the product and maybe you find that there's a particular issue with the way something's working. And I've had this experience in the last week, which I'll show you in a second, where I'm actually using Tableau Prep for a client project. The client has it, they don't know how to use it that well, so I'm sort of helping be the steward of that. And I've come up against a few sort of, blockers, a few challenging areas where I'm thinking, oh God, this is a really basic thing. It's supposed to be able to do this, but I'm having to do things like break the flow up into 3 steps because there's a bug, or I'm coming up with errors that, are difficult to explain. And so if I just give people a couple of minutes just to finish that, we're getting a really interesting spread of results, which is fascinating. We've had 12 people do it. So if you just get a few more, and then I'll share it up on screen. And it's a bit of a loaded question, because I'm asking people their experience with the not so nice parts of prep. But hopefully in a user group like this, I'm speaking to a safe audience. And so if I just sort of share what's been sort of submitted on screen so far, what I'll do is I'll split screen for a bit. So if you still want to share, you can. There we go. So here we go. We've got the survey on the right, and you can see the responses coming in. So, I rarely have errors in prep, 2.4. So there's a strong contingent who I'm going to say strongly disagree, who are scoring it, 1 or 2 maybe. I deliberately asked these questions in a positive way for that exact reason. When I come across errors, I know how to solve them. We'll call that roughly in the middle, right? Out of 5. And then I know how to escalate issues to Tableau. Well, if you have a lot of issues, then that becomes a common thing that you have to sort of do. And so you have to know how to escalate these issues and at least get it to a product manager who you can talk to, or send a support ticket to sort of help with. And if I break down the detail of this, there's probably a few people who are all the way up here. These are sort of the people who are well connected with Tableau directly. Actually, look at that! I didn't know it had this feature. It's sort of an interesting spread. There's people all the way up and down the spectrum. If we look at this, there's people all the way up and down the spectrum again, and again, there's people all the way up and down the spectrum. So sort of unusual for a survey, right, to have an even spread all the way down the spectrum. Normally you have a clump in the middle, and sort of that goes back to maybe what I'm experiencing myself. If I go back to my presentation, which is there's still some rough edges. The last 2 weeks I've been capturing just some of the screenshots that I get, and these are just some of the issues I come up against, and you don't really know them until you hit them. You don't really know them until they're right in front of you. And at that point, I mean, Jenny will know this. At that point, I start. My first port of call is actually Jenny. I'm like, Jenny, hey, is this something you've seen? And Jenny will go, yes. Okay, great. Okay, I'm in safe company here. Then I'll go and try a couple of other solutions. Maybe break the flow up into sections. Go find some other help on the Tableau community. But other times, you'll get errors that just come and then they disappear, and because you don't know why that is, that's obviously a challenge. Now, if I go to the coming soon page for Tableau, going off piece here, going away from my slides, hopefully this work. If I go to I think it's bear with me 1 second. Yeah, improve Tableau prep conductor error messages. So this is something that's actually in Tableau 22.3 for Tableau server, and it was released previously for Tableau Cloud in the previous version 22.2. And what is really interesting is obviously the error messages are useful. It's useful to understand what they are, and Tableau prep are improving these error messages. But what was also really alarming to me is that there's 400 error codes, that have been added, and that makes me think, wow, there's obviously a decent percentage of those are like, oh, the input doesn't exist or the field doesn't exist. Things that happen in everyday work you kind of expect to see. But then, given my experience with errors, I'm also sort of really interested to see how many of those errors are, system errors, and is this sort of error code addition a way for Tableau to better be able to diagnose what's actually going on in the flow and make the support experience better, because we now have a named error that we can go to Tableau with. So I don't want to speculate about what that is, but I think it will help, get to this thing, which is clarity on root causes. And that's just one facet of this whole picture. It's not necessarily just always about errors. It's also just about giving us a little bit of confidence to understand when something goes wrong, can we actually solve it? Do we know what to do? Do we know who to reach out to, and how to get there? And so, if I sort of stop there, that's sort of my sort of overview of this. I think Tableau Prep has been, I think, a wildly successful addition to Tableau. It's probably one of the most fun tools I use in the whole entire stack, because it's fresh, it's new. I've always wished the Tableau Prep would have been a native part of desktop when you connect to data, rather than being a separate thing. So we have one unified experience as a creator. That's something I'm always telling Tableau about. As a creator, why do I have to hop around different browser tabs and different tools all the time? Just give me one place to do it all. But nonetheless, it's still got a long way to go, and I'm hoping the next 4 years, maybe I'm back here again talking about Tableau Prep and how it's been for the last 4 years, and we're now looking at a much more mature product that's really able to go head to head with the likes of Alteryx, because it's added some of those powerful capabilities that we really want, especially around analytics and data prep and cleansing, and we can sort of go to town with that capability, and hopefully bring more people into this user group to do amazing things with Tableau itself. Okay, that's pretty much it from me. I'll stop sharing my screen, and I guess we'll probably hop on to questions, right?
Yes, we will. Thank you so much for that, Tim. That was really great. I really liked that step back. Let's look at this like from a stepped back view and like get a holistic view. That was really fascinating. So
I
thank you.
have to say we have to convince Tableau to do the same from their perspective, because
Yeah.
I'm doing it entirely as an outsider, and I think the
Mm.
State of the Union is normally done by the president. So we should maybe get the head of product at Tableau Prep to do that for the products rather than someone who's a user.
I think it's useful from both sides, but yeah, we'll definitely try and
Yeah.
get that for one of the user groups soon.
Yeah.
So we have a question from Pranav here in the Q&A. If you have questions, remember to drop them in the Q&A. So you were mentioning there briefly with the scripting steps that were getting introduced to help people be able to go beyond what the product can do. So what kind of use cases, would people be using those scripting steps for?
Yeah, so the one that keeps coming up that I've seen used a lot is where people are doing I'm going to call it not really analytics, but they're using R and Python to do, I'm going to call light level data science. So they're sending the data pipeline from prep into another tool that's going to do something. A typical easy one, I think it's accessible for everyone to understand, is sentiment analysis, right? That's not a native capability inside of prep, but you could send data out to another tool that's more capable at doing that kind of analysis than doing it inside of Tableau Prep, and then you bring the responses back, add that onto your data frame, and then off you go. That's the kind of stuff that we're seeing more of. Another use case might be you have bespoke use cases. So in data science, actually, there are a lot of let's call libraries and modules that do very specific things and very specific data sets, especially if you work in finance. Finance companies build models around the way certain things work, and that analysis can't be done in analytics tools easily because of the type of analysis that's being done. So you do often have to send that data out to another tool, and again, R and Python allow you to sort of do that more easily.
Yeah, definitely. I remember like back in the day as well, they used the scripting steps a lot, like doing like, I don't know, like generating rows, for example.
Yeah.
You'd send it
Yeah,
out
that was a good. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
to R or Python, whereas now we have a new rows step that allows you
Yeah,
to do that in prep.
and
So
and
yeah.
and that's exactly the kind of stuff. Let's bring more of that into the fold, so it's easier, because the interface to do that is much easier in prep than it would have been in R and
Yes.
Python. So yeah, we need more of that. Yeah.
Yep. Cool. Brilliant. Thank you though to Irvin, to Donna and Tim for presenting today. And thank you everyone for joining. If anyone has any closing questions, then please feel free to drop them in the chat. This recording will be available hopefully tomorrow, next week. So please get involved with sharing that around everyone as well. But if there aren't any more questions, then we'll wrap up today and we will see you in December for the next one of these user groups. Okay. So thanks very much, everyone, and have a great rest of the day.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, Jenny.
Thank you.